For decades, the European Union's foreign policy was built on a single, optimistic premise, creating a stable, democratic ring of friends around its borders. But in less than 3 years, that foundation cracked. Between 2020 and 2023, military coups swept the Sahel, forming an unbroken belt of juntas. The new leaders immediately ordered the wholesale eviction of Western security forces. French troops, U.S. drone operators, and EU missions were expelled, replaced within months by Russian paramilitary units. This geopolitical flip was fueled by deep, localized frustration. Populations exhausted by persistent insecurity turned their anger toward the former colonial powers and their Western allies. For Europe, the math is stark. More than a decade of strategic investment and over €1 billion spent on capacity building were wiped out almost overnight. These evictions expose a systemic failure in the operating system of the EU's common foreign and security policy. To secure its borders and its future in a multipolar world, Europe has to understand exactly how its rigid, idealism-first approach engineered its own expulsion. For years, the Sahel has been the epicenter of complex cross-border insurgencies and extreme poverty. To stabilize the region, Brussels deployed its primary operational doctrine, the train and equip model. This model relies on massive financial support and intensive military training delivered through common security and defense policy missions. In exchange for this security assistance, recipient nations were required to deliver specific political outputs, adherence to democratic governance, and strict human rights compliance. This mechanical link between European aid and democratic behavior is known as normative conditionality. It is written directly into the legal code of EU foreign policy. But when local armies, many trained by European forces, seized power from failing civilian governments, they triggered a bureaucratic tripwire. EU conditionality rules legally mandated an immediate halt to security assistance. The moment the democratic output stopped, the financial and military input was severed. By automatically suspending cooperation, Brussels instantly stripped itself of all leverage in the region. Institutional leaders experienced foreign policy entrapment. Bound by their own legal frameworks, they could only watch as their strategy unraveled, unable to adapt to the reality on the ground. Without Western support, and amid the ensuing political chaos, violence from insurgent groups rapidly accelerated, pushing these states closer to total collapse. The EU's absolute insistence on strict democratic conditionality left it paralyzed. It acted as a repulsive force, effectively showing Europe the door. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so do strategic competitors. Russia and China immediately stepped in. Their offering was highly attractive to isolated juntas. They provided mercenary forces to guarantee regime survival, with zero political strings attached. No lectures on human rights and no democratic benchmarks. On the economic front, Beijing offered heavy infrastructure investments, entirely decoupled from domestic governance reforms. Look at the structural difference. On the left, the fractured European conditional model. On the right, a highly streamlined transactional alternative. But this multipolar support is not charity. In return, Moscow and Beijing exacted a specific price: reliable diplomatic cover during United Nations votes. The secondary cost is material. These agreements often grant exclusive, unregulated access to national resource wealth. Specifically, they target vast reserves of gold and uranium. This directly threatens European energy security. In Niger, the new military authorities seized control of a major uranium mining subsidiary, previously operated by the French state-owned company Orano. Emboldened by this new backing, the juntas began dismantling the established regional order, starting with the collapse of the EU-backed G5 Sahel security bloc. Next, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger abruptly announced their complete withdrawal from ECOWAS, the region's primary economic and political union. In its place, they formed the Alliance of Sahel States, a mutual defense pact explicitly aligned with multipolar powers. This new geopolitical reality is physically enforced by a localized military alignment, fully insulated from Western pressure. By exploiting the EU's ethical rigidity, strategic competitors executed a rapid, bloodless geopolitical realignment across the heart of Africa. Back in Brussels, the center of institutional decision-making was unable to adapt even as the situation in Africa deteriorated. The European Union possesses massive economic leverage and diplomatic reach, yet its institutional architecture proved completely unable to change course. The common foreign and security policy is built on absolute policy unanimity. To initiate or alter central action, all 27 member states must agree. This unanimity rule means a single dissenting member state possesses the power to veto, delay, or entirely paralyze collective European action. When the central apparatus freezes during a crisis, individual member states must break rank and forge bilateral workarounds to protect their own sovereign interests. Italy serves as a clear example of this fracture. While Brussels debated sanctions, Rome maintained an active military and diplomatic presence in Niger. Through its Mattei Plan, the Italian government adopted a purely pragmatic approach, deliberately bypassing the EU's democratic conditionality to keep lines of communication open. The motivation was strictly operational. Italy requires cooperation from Sahel authorities to control and disrupt human trafficking routes heading toward the Mediterranean. When collective foreign policy fails to deliver security, member states will prioritize transactional pragmatism over shared ideals. Europe is now facing the day after. To maintain global relevance and secure its borders, Brussels has to execute a massive policy pivot. The horizontal axis represents the necessary move away from paternalistic conditionality toward transactional pragmatism. The vertical axis tracks the transition away from failed military capacity building toward tangible economic infrastructure. To survive, the EU must move its foreign policy definitively into this bottom right quadrant. The primary institutional vehicle designed for this shift is the Global Gateway Initiative, a €300 billion investment plan. By offering massive, grant-based infrastructure funding rather than predatory loans, the Global Gateway is engineered to compete directly with China's Belt and Road. The consequences of failing to make this massive strategic transition are immediate, structural, and extremely severe for the continent. Hostile actors have already demonstrated their willingness to weaponize migration, threatening to direct destabilizing streams of displaced people straight at European borders. Long-term, Europe risks ceding its critical mineral supply chains, the raw materials required for the digital and green transitions, entirely to autocratic competitors. The European Union must abandon the idealism of its ring of friends and embrace hard realpolitik. If it doesn't, it faces permanent deselection across the global south.